Okay, so now we're ready to start doing our second effects map. I'm going to make some more room in here, and we'll bring that down into our graph. So once more, we're feeding all of these guys into our map, and then we're going to get into our effects map, and we're doing the same deal again where we're just going to get 4 quadrants. I'm going to copy it and mix a total of 4 of these. And each quadrant gets its own. Oh, I did it again. I always forget to do that. I should really set that first before I copy it, but not me. And then we're going to come back down here, and we're going to do the exact same thing that we did in the first one. So now we're feeding those sort of shape-changing bergs into another, let's come back here, and oh, let's set this to black to grayscale also. That way we can see what we're doing. So now we've, each one of these now is, once the timer starts going, is going to start changing shape. Now we're not going to be grouping it. Now we're going to start randomizing them. So let's scroll down. Oh, what am I doing? I'm not even thinking properly. There we go. It helps if you actually highlight the quadrant. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do our pattern offset. Come in here, do an empty function, and this is very simple. We're just going to get 2 random numbers, and we're going to create a vector 2 out of them. So we're at function, random, I'm going to make a copy, and then a vector float 2, because that position needs to be a float 2. And what we're doing here is this random function, whatever number's in here, it's going to pick a random number between 0 and whatever this number is. And we are going to set that as the output node, so it's going to give us 2 random x and y values. So we can come back to our effects map, and we can add an iterate, so we have more than one of these things happening. And we're going to set that as the root. I think I had it set at 3. Not sure. I don't think I marked it down. Let me check. Yes, I did have it set at 3. Because it looks different now, so I just want to make sure. Right, so that is our pattern offset. Actually, you know what? Let's just get rid of these guys. Because, wait, are we going to do the same thing to each one of them? Yeah, I'm going to let's do this to 1 right now. Because we're going to have the exact same functions in each one of these 4. We're just going to do it to a different little island, or berg, I should call it. All right, so the next thing we're going to look at is our pattern size. Now, we don't, and again, this is going to be a float too. So I'm going to create an empty function, and we are going to get in there. Okay. I do want them to have different sizes. I don't want the differential to be too much. I don't want any really teeny weeny ones. So while I do want them random, I also want to set a floor for it. Now, there's a bunch of different ways you can do this. I chose to do it like this. So we're going to use a constant here. We're going to get a random node. So we're going to need a second random node. So I'm just going to copy that and paste that. We'll save that for later. And we're going to need a vector float too for our output node, right? Okay, so if I just wanted a random number between 1 and 2, we could have done just what we did before. We can, you know, whether we have 2 random here or 1, it doesn't really matter, but we would just plug it in there. I'm going to set a condition though, instead of just doing that. So let me get another float, a constant float, and I had set this to 0.75, but again, this is going to be the floor, and then I'm going to get a greater than, so comparison greater, and then we're also going to need an if-else statement. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set up my condition. If this random number, it's true if this random number is greater than 75, 0.75 rather. So I know this is going to generate a random number between 0 and 1, and if that random number is greater than 0.75, this is true. And if that is indeed the case, we might as well set this up now because that's where it's going. If this is indeed the case, then I want that number out there. If it's not the case, so in other words, if it's smaller than 0.75, I want to, now here's where you can get different, because here's where I set my floor. Now whatever you decide what kind of functionality you want to have in here is entirely up to you. What I ended up choosing was I got an add node, and what I told it to do was that if this random number is smaller than 0.75, I want you to take another random number between 0 and 1, and I want you to add it to whatever that number was, and that's your result. So you are going to end up with some that are bigger than this one because you're taking, you know, it's going to be bigger, but the odds of it being small, much smaller, are pretty slim. I'm going to click and hit the space bar. So that's what we've got so far. And that is our size. So let's go back into our effects map, back into our quadrant. And now the one other thing that we want to take care of is the rotation, but we're not going to animate this. This is really kind of the starting position, because right now all of our individual little bergs are all aligned exactly. I mean, they're all different sizes in different places, but they're all the same. Now they're all going to start moving around, so eventually it'll look a bit more different, but it'll always kind of be moving together. So we don't want that. And we just want to offset them on rotation. We don't actually have to move them around. And therefore, this becomes a very easy function. And we're going to get a constant float, and we're going to get a random. I'm going to plug the two together. This is going to be our result, and we want a random number between 0 and 360, right? Or maybe it's, I don't know if it does turns, or maybe it does turns. If it's turns, then it's 100, but it doesn't really matter because it's still going to work, because it's just going to continue on in the spin. But honestly, I'm not sure if this counts turns. Doesn't matter. Okay, so we're finished with that. Let's get back in here. And oh, you know what we didn't do? Let's, now that we're done with this, we have to make more. So I'm just going to copy this, and I'm going to make three pastes. And now all we have to do is go in there and change our image inputs, because everything else stays the same. And there we go. So that's the big FX map. Did I set that to 3? I think I did. Yeah. And now what we need to do is we need to sort of strengthen this up and do stuff to it so that it looks a bit more like icebergs. All right, let's start with the normal map. So we made this. I just looked at my notes. I actually, in my notes, had the intensity set at 4. So I'm going to go ahead and bump that up. Later on, I'm gonna want to have this completely opaque when it leaves this node. Okay. As it stands right now, because we've got the alpha cut out, you know, it's showing alpha, which is fine. What we're going to do, we're going to sort of strengthen it up a bit. I'm going to get a couple blend nodes. First thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy them over themselves, so this will strengthen that up a bit. And then for any leftover transparency in there, I'm going to go ahead and get a normal color. And I'm going to press D to dock it. And I'm going to use that as my normal map, not forgetting to change my input to the correct one. So we can bring this down here, and that pretty much squares away the normals that are going to be coming out of here. Right. We're going to need to make a couple of masks. So let's start with that. Again, everything is now going to be based off of the results of this final effects map. So I'm going to get a levels node. And what I'm trying to do here, again, this is going to take a few steps. We need to make a mask that takes care of all of this. But I mean, I could go ahead, plug it in here, and just like really wash it out all at once with the levels. And I'm going to start losing information. If I kind of take my time with it and step it up, it'll be better off. So I'm going to go gently. Let me get into my levels. And we're going to start. See what's happening. It's being sluggish. I'm going in the wrong direction. That's why I couldn't see anything. Right. But I don't want to go too far. So I'm going to kind of take it easy. I've bumped it up some, but I'm not overreacting. And then I'm going to get a blend node. And let's just do a lighten. Well, it didn't make much of a difference. How about an overlay? That's better. And why don't we do another one of those? That's too much. So I'm just going to get another levels now. And get rid of this one. And again, I'm just going to bump it up now. Yeah. Not too much. So I'm trying to keep the same basic size as my sort of the over. I'm not worried about like the high-low areas right now. I want all of it, but I want a pretty accurate representation of it. So I think that I just cut in too much there. We might have to do this one more time. And let's try another. I don't know if this is going to work. We'll see. Yeah, that's better. So I'm still seeing a little gray in there. I'll bring in one more levels node. But I'm trying to keep that, trying to keep a nice edge there. There. Okay. So that's going to be sort of the mask for my entire exterior. We're going to want another levels node to correct for our height zones, if you will. So this is an easier one. We're just going to tighten it up. I want these flatter, basically. So we'll go like this. Yep. Oh, too what? All right. I don't know. Maybe we need. Yeah, that's probably good enough. I mean, I'm not too worried about that. But you're trying to get sort of broad areas of more or less the same color, because you don't want your height map to be too busy. You start getting like these little jaggy peaks and you can't really control them very well. That's better handled with normals, the detail work. Right, so now again we're going to make a mask off of this one with another levels node that's only going to deal with the high areas. So I'm now going to be dropping out these darker gray areas, which are going to be left over for slush. That's going to be kind of where I'm going to put my slushy areas. So it's only, you know, if you think of this black as sort of being the base of where the water is, these slushy areas will then also have a, they'll be affected by the way I have it set up, they'll be affected by the normals of the water, whereas anything that we're making with this mask now will not be affected by the normals of the water, because this will be the mask that will make that completely opaque. So only the higher areas. So I'm going to correct for these lighter gray and white areas, and I'm going to make them all white. And I always move these things in the wrong direction when I start. Yep. It's like a left-right problem. Too much. So kind of there. And then we bring them up. Oh, maybe we want to get it a little bit. A little cleaner than that. So I think that's pretty okay. I'm not liking those edges. They're too round. Okay. And now we're going to need an invert grayscale, because we actually have to create a mask for the stuff that we just got rid of. And we're going to do that by subtracting the stuff we've already got. So we're going to get a blend node, and we're going to take this chap, and we're going to cut out those areas that so now what we just got rid of here, those dark gray areas, we've now made white, and then we're going to get another levels node, and we're going to get rid of all the grays, so it's only black and white. So that now gives us this mask for where we can put like the slush. Right. And I guess that brings us to the slush. Oh, I have to move these out of the way. We keep creeping. I used Clouds 1. For this. Again, pretty straightforward. Again with the levels nodes. And we're going to try to get this to look more like, I'm thinking where the black is going to be water peeking through. So this is what I want, you know, what I see here is white is the bits of floating slush, and what's black is water. That's probably pretty good. And then I put a splatter node because I'm thinking later on I might want to change this. So rather than just doing a transform 2D. This seemed to work pretty nicely. And it'll allow me later on, if I want to expose it by doing, you know, the tiling. But I don't want it that big. I think I had it set at 2. But again, it's easy to change. Now, though, I'm going to get a transform 2D and do a horizontal. Oh, and that's the other reason why I put that in there, because I was thinking, I think I ended up not using it. But if you use a splatter node here, you can pan it so that you can get an extra dimension of movement. But I ended up getting rid of it because I thought it was a bit too much. But that's what I used it for originally, so feel free to use the splatter node to get yourself all kinds of effect. And then I blended these two guys together with lighten so that they're kind of going across each other. And now we're ready to make our slush. So we've got that in there. Then we have the high areas mask. I'm sorry, the foam areas mask. This one, yeah, that's what we're using here. So that's our mask. And then we're adding this because we want to fill in that white. We want to fill this stuff in here. So we just added that to the other mask. So now we've got this slush on the outside. I'm thinking let's fool around with that grid number. I think I kind of like it bigger. But again, we can fool around with that later. So I think that's it now, and we set this in as our mask. So, oh, I had changed that to base color. So let's change this back to mask. And then our height we had down here, and this one becomes our height mount. And there you have it. So this is the first part of the ice flow. Sorry, I'm organizing. Let's come back out to our Explorer. I'm going to save this. And we're going to make a new material. I mean, new substance, rather, sorry. And this time we are going to use PBR. And we're going to call this main flow. And it brings our output nodes in for us. And we can now go to our library because I saved small flow. Oops, wrong one. That's the archive file. You want the yellow one. So that's the normal on top. And then I'm going to click up here to see what my connector names are called. Got my normal, my mask, and my height. So that's what I'm going to be combining with my water material. We're not going to go through how to make a water right now. I have other videos on that. I'm going to use a water I have called Simple Water. Ooh, which one? There's a couple of them. I'm going to come on here, I'm going to right click. And then this one is, I think I want this one. Find out in a minute. Yeah, it doesn't matter. I can change it later. It's just I really like the other one because it worked really well, and it, it it was like very gentle, and I like the way it worked with this. So here we are. We're at half an hour. I think I'm going to stop this here, and we'll finish up in the last video. We're just going to go ahead and start using these masks to start just connecting these two materials up, because most of the stuff that, all the important stuff, if I want to open this up in like a separate, is that it? Is that the one we made? No, that's the one I made. If you want to open this up in a separate window without shutting this one down, open it as a, open reference, and it'll create a new thingy up here without dropping this one. So this is the hard part. We just finished. And what we're going to do now for the next one is we're just going to connect them up. So it's not going to be a big deal.